In the future, a zombie virus spreads rapidly, with infections appearing across the country. Symptoms can take days to manifest, or just minutes. A normal person can suddenly turn into a mindless monster. These zombies are faster than usual and can track their prey by scent. Today, the World Health Organization officially declares a global pandemic. The world descends into chaos and violence. Only children remain unaware of the full extent of the disaster. Little Abby plays with her younger brother but senses her mother's unease. Her father, a soldier, left home days ago and hasn't returned. Worried for their safety, he told his wife to take the kids to a relative's house. The mother quickly packs, grabs her children, and heads for the car. But the moment they step outside, zombies attack. Abby, quick-witted, hides under the car and survives. But her mother and brother are torn apart. Right before her eyes, her mother turns into a zombie. A soldier arrives and shoots her. He then orders Abby to cover her ears, before putting down her brother too. Years pass. Abby grows into a tough survivor, trained by a soldier named Mike. She masters every skill needed to live in the wild. Civilization collapses. Nature reclaims the towering buildings. Abby and Mike decide to move toward the coast. One night, they camp in the forest. Mike carefully sets traps around their camp. At midnight, a tin can alarm jingles. He wakes up and checks the perimeter, finding a single hare caught in a trap. Thinking it's just a stray animal, he's about to turn back, when a rustling sound comes from the bushes. He calms his frightened horse and quickly draws his gun. A zombie lunges from the darkness. Without hesitation, they grab their gear and flee. Days pass with no encounters. They train as they travel, always prepared, until one afternoon, as they cross a hill, they spot a car in the distance. The driver stumbles out, only to be attacked by a zombie. Immediately Mike signaled Abby to hold her fire. But out of reflex, she pulled the trigger. The bullet barely missed the driver. With no choice, Mike shot down the zombie. They approached the car, searching for anything useful, when a voice crackled through the radio, a teammate of the driver. Mike, wanting to avoid trouble, was ready to leave, but Abby, eager for human contact, waved at the approaching convoy, trying to explain what had happened. However, the convoy leader ordered them to drop their weapons while his men checked the scene. Abby kept showing goodwill, but the group remained hostile. One of them threw an insult, escalating the tension. Just as guns were about to be drawn, a pregnant woman stepped forward, signaling for calm. Suddenly, strange noises echoed from the hillside. The horses nearby neighed anxiously. Then, out of nowhere, a massive horde of zombies charged from all directions. The convoy leader shouted for everyone to get in the vehicles. Meanwhile, Mike and Abby stood back to back, fighting. With too many zombies, they resorted to using blades to conserve ammo. The battle turned the hillside into a war zone. A woman with a ponytail lit a Molotov cocktail, but before she could throw it, a zombie tackled her from behind. The bottle slipped from her grasp, igniting the pregnant woman's car, making the situation even worse. At the same time, a burly man wearing a helmet was bitten on the shoulder. He managed to throw the zombie off but realized he was doomed. He raised his gun to end it quickly, only to find it empty. In rage and despair, he let out a roar and mutated instantly. The monstrous zombie lunged at the convoy leader, tearing him apart. Abby quickly helped the pregnant woman and her husband into a car. Mike fought off the surrounding zombies before jumping into the driver's seat. He slammed the gas, breaking through the horde, leaving the hungry creatures howling behind. After the battle, Abby took inventory. Their supplies were severely depleted, and ammo was nearly gone. Mike asked the pregnant woman where they were headed. She said there was a settlement by a river to the northeast. Mike had passed through many settlements before and knew they rarely welcomed outsiders. He had no plans to head that way, but as he turned onto a smaller road, the car suddenly stalled. David, the woman's husband, checked under the hood and confirmed the vehicle was beyond repair. Left with no choice, the four continued on foot. They reached an abandoned neighborhood called Sunshine Haven and decided to take shelter in a ruined building. Mike went in first to secure the area before they lit a small fire to stay warm. Abby, curious, struck up a conversation with the couple. She learned that the convoy had once lived on a remote farm. They had started with 40 people, but when zombies overran the place, they were forced to burn their wheat fields, losing their entire food supply. Luckily, their leader had made contact with a settlement via radio. The place was a floating town built by lashing together old boats on a river. Home to over 100 people, it had fresh water, food, and even doctors. After a vote, the group decided to head there. Hearing this, Abby mentioned that she and Mike were planning to head west to find a boat and a refugee camp. Meanwhile, Mike finished setting traps around the building. He spread out a map, showing the couple the route to the floating settlement. However, he made it clear that he wouldn't be escorting them. After the recent battle, zombies might still be tracking them. The best move was to get as far away as possible. Abby was puzzled by Mike's cold attitude. She thought the floating settlement sounded like a promising refuge. But Mike was firm. He even gave her a serious lesson on why approaching strangers carelessly could lead to disaster that night. A violent storm raged. The zombies from earlier had tracked their scent, eventually finding the abandoned car in the woods. It was clear these creatures still retained some intelligence. Meanwhile, David couldn't sleep. During the escape, he had twisted his ankle but hid it to avoid worrying his wife. Mike noticed and, despite himself, decided to help them reach the river settlement. On the rooftop, Abby heard zombies nearby and rushed to warn Mike. But it was too late. They had already entered the building. One chased her relentlessly. With no other option, she lunged toward a broken window, gripping the metal bars as the zombie lost its footing and plunged to the ground. Just then, Mike arrived, pulling her back inside, but more zombies poured in. One triggered a trap, causing a massive explosion that threw them into chaos. Seizing the opportunity, Mike led everyone out of the area. Suddenly, Abby remembered something. She had visited this place as a child. A few miles away, there was a small airport. Her father owned a plane, and they used to fly together. If they could find a working aircraft, it would be a faster and safer escape. Mike, however, refused. What if they got trapped by zombies on the way? The debate escalated until David suggested a vote. The decision was 3-2 in favor of Abby's plan. Mike reluctantly agreed. They hadn't gone far when they came across a car with a flat tire. Inside was a corpse, shot dead. Mike ordered everyone to search a nearby building for supplies. Abby and David scavenged but failed to notice a family of 4 hiding behind a stone wall. They did, however, find canned food and a wheelchair, useful for the pregnant woman. As soon as they left, zombies stormed in, discovering the hidden family. The terrified children screamed, before being torn apart on the spot. The scene cut to Mike's group reaching the airport, but as they looked around, the airstrip was completely empty. Not a single plane in sight, not even a chicken wandering around. Mike smirked coldly. "Told you, waste of time." Abby, disheartened, scanned the area, until she spotted her father's old hangar. She sprinted over and, to her relief, found his plane still inside. Mike handed a gun to the pregnant woman for protection while David checked the engine. Meanwhile, Mike and Abby climbed the control tower to scan for threats. From a distance, a massive horde emerged from the forest. They raced back to warn the others. Desperate, they scrambled to start the plane. The zombies closed in, but at the last moment, the engine roared to life. The plane rolled forward, with the horde chasing right behind. Mike kicked off the zombies clinging to the aircraft. Finally, the plane lifted off, soaring into the stormy sky. But before they could celebrate, the engine suddenly died. Smoke billowed from the back as they plummeted straight toward the ground. Fortunately, the plane crashed into a dense tree canopy, softening the impact. Miraculously, all 4 survived unharmed. Mike checked the map. They were only a hill away from the floating settlement, about a 2-day walk. He decided they would rest for the night and continue in the morning. David helped his wife lie down, then quietly grabbed a lantern and wandered into an empty warehouse. Hearing movement outside, Mike went to investigate, only to find the pregnant woman searching for food. They exchanged a few words. Mike shared a memory. 3 months after rescuing Abby, he had taken in a boy named Jimmy. His mother, a drug addict, had barely begun recovery before being bitten. Despite losing her, Jimmy was a strong and bright kid who brought joy to Mike and Abby. But one day, Jimmy was bitten too. Mike had no choice but to put him down himself. Since the outbreak, he had killed too many friends and allies. Over time, he forced himself to keep others at a distance, believing that detachment was the only way to survive. Meanwhile, David sat alone, gripping his gun. He had been bitten long ago but hadn't turned yet. He knew the infection progressed at different rates, so he hadn't revealed it. But now, the fever was setting in. The next morning, they crossed a cornfield into the woods. David staggered, sweating profusely. His wife touched his forehead and recoiled. He was burning up. Mike noticed David's soaked pant leg. As soon as Abby and the pregnant woman moved ahead, he shoved David against a tree and pulled up his pant leg, revealing the bite. Instantly, Mike drew his gun. Before he could fire, Abby called from the distance. Mike hesitated, then instead warned David to end things himself before it was too late. He walked away, scanning the area. Ahead, they spotted a house with lights on. Mike approached cautiously. Suddenly, floodlights turned on, and a voice over a loudspeaker warned them to stay back. Ignoring Mike's protests, Abby stepped into the light, explaining they were travelers, including a pregnant woman, just looking for shelter. After a pause, the lights shut off, and the door opened. To show good faith, Mike and Abby raised their hands and placed their weapons in a crate outside. David and his wife followed. Inside, the house had electricity and a surprising amount of lab equipment. Their host introduced himself as an engineer who had built his own power system, sustaining the house for years. He even grew his own food, as he served a simple meal of fresh vegetables. The group savored the rare taste of real food. Abby eagerly took a hot shower, while Mike settled into the living room, spotting a laptop on a desk. He plugged in a USB drive. It contained old photos of him and his wife. She had been pregnant. Their faces full of hope. Nearby, Abby found an old picture of her own family. The warm atmosphere reminded him of life before the apocalypse. But the pregnant woman grew uneasy. Her baby hadn't moved in a long time. Later, they gathered in the living room. Their host brought out homemade wine, looking like a serene hermit amidst the chaos of the world. He shared his story. The house had been his home for over 20 years. His wife was killed by zombies, but despite hearing of the floating settlement, he chose to stay alone. As the conversation went on, his views became unsettling. He believed the virus was Earth's way of evolving, that only the strongest deserved to survive. His words carried a disturbing, almost genocidal philosophy. Mike subtly tensed, growing wary. Just then, David's condition worsened. He stumbled into the bathroom and lifted his shirt. The infection had spread across his body. But when he walked back out, he wasn't panicked. Instead, he found his wife, Abby, and the others unconscious. The wine had been drugged. The host calmly rolled up his sleeve, revealing a strange device on his arm. It emitted a piercing ultrasonic sound, causing David to writhe in agony. This device works only on the infected, the host explained. He then tied them up and dragged them into his lab, announcing his plan to experiment on them. Why, if he had the technology to control the infected, why not use it to save humanity? The homeowner smirked. Why would I do that when I have other plans? He pulled back a curtain, revealing a large iron cage. Inside was his wife, completely turned into a ravenous zombie. For years, he had studied these mutated creatures. Now, David would be his perfect test subject. The pregnant woman gasped, finally realizing that David had been bitten all along. The homeowner opened the cage and used his ultrasonic device to command the zombie, sending it lunging toward the restrained group. Mike reacted instantly, kicking the creature away, but the zombie quickly turned to David instead. Then, something unexpected happened. David's body had already begun to change. He snapped his chains effortlessly and charged at the zombie. Mike grabbed a gun from the table and shot the ultrasonic system, disabling it before leading the group out of the lab. Before leaving, he locked the door behind them, trapping the homeowner inside. Mike suddenly turned and punched David hard in the face. "I can't let him live," he growled. "Not now, we need to go." The homeowner broke free, and with no time to argue, they ran for the car. But as they tried to escape, a bigger problem loomed. The horde was closing in fast, following their scent. Worse, the pregnant woman suddenly screamed. Her water had broken. They needed a safe place immediately. Ahead, zombies blocked the road entirely. Mike clenched his jaw. "Hold on tight, I'm going straight through." The undead scattered, but as soon as the car passed, they gave chase. A few miles ahead, a fallen tree blocked the road. "No choice, out of the car. We run." Abby helped the woman as they dashed toward the floating settlement. It was only a few hundred meters away. Mike stared at him for a moment, then nodded silently. Without another word, he carried the pregnant woman and ran. David lit a cigarette, staying cool until the end. He charged straight into the horde, fighting with everything he had. Strangely, he was stronger than a regular infected. But even that wasn't enough against the alpha zombie. In an instant, it snapped David's neck. Then, it led the horde forward, continuing the chase. After a grueling run, Mike, Abby, and the woman finally saw the floating settlement's watchtower. Abby waved frantically, screaming for help. The guards spotted the horde and opened fire, successfully pushing him back. A small boat ferried him to the floating base. Once inside, Mike placed the pregnant woman on a clean bed. A blonde woman checked her condition and then asked Mike and Abby to step outside. The people of the settlement were cautious, carefully inspecting Mike and Abby for any wounds. The settlement was called King's Landing. Despite being saved, Mike remained wary of the place. The next morning, their leader, a man named George, invited Mike and Abby to talk. He welcomed them, offering peace and a place to stay. But Mike had no intention of staying long. George narrowed his eyes. "And what if I don't want you to leave?" Mike smirked. He knew human nature too well. Abby, however, was different. She was tired of running. She wanted stability. Their conversation was interrupted when the blonde woman returned. The baby had been born healthy, but the mother was dying. She had only hours left. If anyone had something to say, now was the time. She named her daughter Hope. "If it weren't for her," she whispered, "I wouldn't have made it this far." But tragically, she wouldn't live to watch her grow up. She placed the baby in Mike's arms. "Please, take care of her." She hoped that one day, Hope would grow up strong, just like Abby. Mike couldn't refuse a dying wish. He nodded silently, accepting the responsibility. Meanwhile, deep in the forest near the river, the deranged homeowner had found their trail. Corpses of fallen zombies surrounded him. The alpha zombie sensed humans nearby and prepared to attack, until the homeowner activated his ultrasonic device. Stopping it instantly, he stared toward the floating settlement, his eyes gleaming with unknown intent. Abby slowly adapted to life on the settlement. She even grew close to a blonde-haired boy. For the first time in a long while, she felt happy, trying to forget the horrors of the outside world. One night, she saw the boy sneaking off with another girl. Jealousy stirred inside her, and she quietly followed. Unintentionally, she wandered deep into the ship's lower decks and discovered a strange device hanging from the railing. As she studied it, the blonde-haired boy suddenly appeared behind her. "This is our last line of defense," he explained. The entire floating city had been rigged with explosives. If zombies ever breached the settlement, they could blow everything sky high. The boy pointed to a hidden passage beneath the ship's floor. There was once a plan to build a dam here, so a tunnel was dug under the river. The dam was never built, but the tunnel remains. If things go south, we can escape through it before triggering the explosives. It seemed like King's Landing was truly safe, but as the saying goes, never declare safety too soon. The next morning, the real nightmare began. The deranged homeowner had used his ultrasonic device to lead a massive horde of zombies straight to the settlement. A guard on the deck yawned, unaware of the danger, until, in an instant, a zombie lunged and dragged him overboard. Then, the horde flooded the floating city. Mike quickly handed the baby to the blonde woman and rushed to find Abby. Although the ship had an emergency escape route, the attack was too sudden. No one had time to flee. Abby was running around, helping others, when the homeowner ambushed her from behind. Mike saw it happen. He yelled and sprinted to her, but a zombie tackled him down to the lower deck. He grabbed his knife, quickly stabbing the creature, but the homeowner had jumped down as well. Ready for a fight, the madman attacked, kicking Mike several times while rambling about how humanity must not resist the cleansing order. But Mike had been waiting for this moment. He grabbed the man's arm, tore the ultrasonic device from his grip, and smashed it against the wall. Without his control, the zombies immediately turned on him. In a flash, they tore the homeowner apart. Meanwhile, the survivors had started escaping through the tunnel. The blonde-haired boy was pressured to activate the explosives, but Mike and Abby were still inside. Just then, Abby was pinned by the alpha zombie. She struggled, trying to push it off, until she noticed the bracelet on its wrist. Her breath caught. It was her father's bracelet. The man she had lost long ago had become this monster. Mike had no time for hesitation. He grabbed Abby, pulled her up, and dragged her toward the tunnel. They sprinted toward the exit, chasing the light at the end. He triggered the explosives, engulfing King's Landing in flames. Miraculously, Mike and Abby escaped just in time. Before they could catch their breath, the alpha zombie suddenly emerged from the wreckage. Somehow, it had survived the explosion. Mike charged forward to fight, but Abby calmly raised her gun. A single bullet pierced through the creature's head. She knew it had once been her father, but that person was long gone. The sun rose over the ruined world. Mike led the group onward, searching for another refuge. The movie ended there.